Darth Bane. Darth Bane was born in 1026 before the Battle of Yavin. He was raised as a poor miner on the Outer Rim planet Apatros. His birth name was Dessel. Des, as he had been nicknamed, was often bullied by his father and other miners. His father blamed him for the death of his wife, who died during childbirth. He considered him to be the bane of his existence, and even began calling him by that name frequently. Young Dessel learned to fend for himself, ignoring the threats and insults hurled at him by his father and the other miners, and grew into a muscular young man. One day, when Dessel was 18, his drunken father berated him until Dessel stood up to him and challenged him to a fight. His father beat him until his ribs cracked, although Dessel withstood the pain without sound. That night, filled with hate, Dessel envisioned his father dying by picturing a giant hand squeezing his heart. The next morning, his father was dead. Unknown to Dessel, he had used the Force to kill him. Dessel would also unknowingly use the Force several times throughout his early life, allowing him to sense the locations of individuals, as well as any hidden weapons they'd attempt to use against him. On one occasion, he had used a soldier's own hidden vibroblade against him by sheer instinct. Dessel would later join the Brotherhood of Darkness as a foot soldier.
Explanation.
The Brotherhood of Darkness was an organization of Sith that rose to power in the last decade of the Galactic Republic's Dark Age, a force of warriors and soldiers meant to rain fire upon Republic worlds. The Brotherhood existed under the leadership of the Sith Council of Lords, constantly warring the Jedi Order's Army of Light, until both armies were utterly decimated. Dessel quickly rose through the ranks, as his use of the Force allowed him to make optimal decisions and guide his unit away from death. On one occasion, he found that when he had been blinded by a flash grenade, he could still see the location of his Republic enemies at a distance, and used a sniper rifle to eliminate them in seconds. Even though this ability was not known to him, his Force affinity was noticed by others, and he was taken to Korriban to enroll at the Sith Academy. Given an opportunity to create a new identity for himself, Dessel thought back to the cruelty of his father and decided to take on a new name to signify his new life: Bane. Bane did all he could to learn more, including his studies of the old Sith archives. To his surprise, his masters discouraged him from studying the old archives, for they believed they represented a time long gone. Bane obliged for a time, but would eventually return to studying the archives. From them, he learned more about the history of the Sith and the power of the dark side, obtaining new knowledge about wielding the dark side of the Force. Most importantly, studying the old ways, Bane began to question the direction the Brotherhood of Darkness had taken, and he seemed especially interested in finding out why none of the current Sith Lords took the title Darth. He would learn that Lord Khan, the one who created the Brotherhood of Darkness, had forbidden any Sith from taking the title Darth, as he claimed that the use of this title would only encourage the infighting that had nearly destroyed the Sith thousands of years earlier. Equality is a lie, a myth to appease the masses. Simply look around you, and you will see the lie for what it is. There are those with power, those with the strength and will to lead, and there are those meant to follow, those incapable of anything but servitude and a meager, worthless existence. Eventually, Bane had been told that he was to stop studying the archives, but his doubts about the Brotherhood had only grown. He was angered and defied the request by leaving the academy for the Valley of the Dark Lords in search of answers from the tombs of long-dead Sith Lords. However, Bane found no Sith spirits in the tombs, concluding that they judged the current Sith to be weak and unworthy. Furthermore, once he obtained the Holocron of Darth Revan, his belief that the Brotherhood was mistaken was only reaffirmed. Bane believed that the Brotherhood was flawed, and that Khan placed the greater good of the Order over the dark side as a whole, preventing the Sith from defeating the Jedi Order. Khan was a traitor. He led the Brotherhood away from the teachings of the ancient Sith. He turned his back on the very essence of the dark side. He abandoned the Brotherhood of Darkness and took on the title of Darth. With time, Bane would bring about the destruction of the Brotherhood. The Sith were no more. At least, that's what he led the Jedi to believe. He then instituted a rule of 2, which stated there could be only 2 Sith, 1 master and 1 apprentice, to avoid the infighting that had plagued the Sith for millennia. 2 there should be, no more, no less. 1 to embody the power, the other to crave it. The rule of 2 states that when the apprentice becomes powerful enough in the ways of the dark side to take the title of master, only then would they be worthy of the title. This transfer of power would only take place when the apprentice takes their master's life and finds a worthy student to repeat the cycle. Shortly after the destruction of the Brotherhood, Darth Bane took on an apprentice, Darth Zannah. Darth Bane's critical impacts were the destruction of the Brotherhood of Darkness and instituting the Rule of 2. The practice of the Rule of 2 survived with varying levels of enforcement for 1,000 years. By the year 130 after the Battle of Yavin, a new Sith Order emerged under the leadership of Darth Krayt, thus taking the place of the former Order of the Sith Lords. Unlike Bane's order, Krayt abolished the Rule of 2 and replaced it with the Rule of 1, with 1 Dark Lord of the Sith representing the Order itself, while also commanding many lords, acolytes, and minions. His revision of the Sith was met with extreme disapproval and outrage, particularly from the gatekeeper of Darth Bane's Holocron. When Krayt sought the wisdom of the ancient Sith Lords through their holocrons, Darth Nihilus did not provide him with any helpful information. Darth Undeath accused him of heresy, and Darth Bane warned the Rule of 1 would be the death of Krayt and the entire Sith. The most important component of Darth Bane's arsenal was his Orbalisk armor, the origin of which is as follows. Darth Bane would come upon a manuscript about the ancient Dark Lord Freeden Nad, indicating his tomb is located on Duxon, a moon of Onderon. Darth Bane was forced to crash land on Duxon. He survived the crash, but his vessel was destroyed in the process. He was able to make it to the tomb and immediately began searching it. There, Bane located Nad's holocron. However, as Bane moved to claim it, he was attacked by a number of beetle-like creatures in the chamber where the holocron was. Bane was unable to keep them away, and 2 of them attached to his skin. As they could not be removed, this caused the Sith Lord to be in a perpetual state of pain from the creatures gnawing on his skin, only enhanced as they began to slowly multiply and spread across his body. As he began to study Nad's holocron, Bane discovered that the creatures were parasites called Orbalisks that could not be removed. Though they caused the Dark Lord to be in constant pain, their shells were impenetrable. Even lightsabers could not crack them. The Orbalisks, covering nearly all of Bane's body, formed an impervious suit of armor. Furthermore, they gave Bane tremendous healing abilities and pumped chemicals into his bloodstream, enhancing his connection to the Force while increasing his rage, thus boosting his power in battle. Because they increased his capabilities while causing him to suffer unending pain, Bane viewed the creatures as both a gift and a curse. He spent days studying the holocron. With time, Darth Bane became very interested in creating his own holocron, but he failed each time he attempted to do it. With time, he had begun to wonder if the Orbalisks could be holding him back, and he sent his apprentice to research possible ways of removing them. In the meantime, he traveled to Tython, a deep-core world, hoping to learn of a way to create his own holocron successfully. At a later point in time, Zannah and Bane found themselves in an ancient fortress, outnumbered by Jedi, but the two Sith were able to gain the upper hand, thanks to the ferocity of Bane's fighting style and the advantages granted to him by his Orbalisk armor. They managed to kill most of their opponents, but as Bane moved to electrocute the last target, the Jedi created a protection bubble to deflect Bane's Force lightning back on him, frying the Sith Lord and killing the Orbalisks on his flesh. In response, the parasites released a deadly poison that threatened to kill Bane. Zannah quickly ended the last Jedi enemy and took Bane to her ship. She took Bane to Ambria, a small desert planet, to a healer named Caleb. She had brought her cousin Derovit with her, but the healer refused to cooperate and instead promised to heal Bane only if Zannah gave up herself and her master to the Jedi. Zannah agreed to surrender and sent a message to the Jedi Temple, informing the Jedi that the Sith Lord who had killed a number of Jedi on Tython was on Ambria, helpless. The healer Caleb then began to heal Bane. When Bane awoke days later, he was free of the Orbalisks and cured of their poison. Zannah told him what she had done, and he expressed his disappointment before asking her to kill him, sparing him the life of a prisoner of the Jedi. However, Zannah had another plan in mind all along. She killed Caleb and then used her powers to drive Derovit mad. The Jedi soon came ready to arrest the Sith, but Zannah had hidden herself and her master. All they found was Derovit, who in his madness attacked the Jedi. They killed him easily, believing he was the Sith. At long last, the Jedi thought they had finally eliminated the Sith. When Bane awoke, Zannah told him what had happened, and he admitted that he underestimated her, and was proud of her. One day he told her she would have the power to overwhelm him and take an apprentice of her own. Darth Bane distracted his apprentice with tasks, while he proceeded to explore ways to transfer his essence into another being, ensuring he would live longer than his physical body permitted. He had stumbled upon something in a book. According to record, an ancient Sith Lord named Darth Andidu had lived for centuries due to his use of the dark side of the Force. Though there was very little information available, Bane was determined to learn Andidu's secret and save the Sith by living longer. One afternoon, Bane, under the guise of a wealthy merchant, arranged a meeting with Argel 10, an authority on Sith artifacts, at a local cantina. The Sith Lord despised the man, who believed himself to be an expert on the Sith, when Bane was confident that Ten knew nothing of the true power of the dark side. Nonetheless, Ten was useful, and so the Sith Lord had utilized his assistance multiple times in the past to acquire Sith relics. Bane had tasked Ten to find information on Darth Andidu, and after a great deal of searching, Ten had located an ancient manuscript on Andidu, which he sold to the Dark Lord. The text revealed that there was a fortress dedicated to Andidu on the deep core world of Prakith. Bane decided to send Zannah on an assignment to a different planet, while he secretly traveled to Prakith to learn the secret to immortality and recover Andidu's holocron. On the return trip, Bane accessed the holocron, but found that the gatekeeper was unwilling to teach him how to live on after death. Angered, he forced it to tell him. By plunging his consciousness into the holocron, he was able to quite literally take the knowledge from the device, thus learning the art of essence transfer. Using the dark side, he could transfer his spirit into another's body, and although this ritual was extremely dangerous, Bane was convinced that his will was strong enough to overpower his target. Shortly after he learned the art of essence transfer, Zannah made it clear she found Bane weak and unworthy of being her master. The two Sith Lords drew their lightsabers and engaged in combat. Knowing that the loser would die, both fought furiously, with Bane slowly pushing Zannah back. his former apprentice, then unleashed her Sith sorcery, only to have Bane successfully repel her attack on his mind. As Bane charged forward, ready to attack, Zannah countered his assault by creating deadly dark side tendrils. These were pure manifestations of malevolent force energy summoned through Sith magic. The tendrils rose in the form of black mist from the ground and took the form of serpentine tentacles which swarmed their victim and attacked with the power of pure dark side. Exceptionally powerful and difficult to conjure, this force power required complete mental concentration. When conjured by a seasoned Sith sorcerer, dark side tendrils were able to instantly annihilate any kind of matter they contacted, as well as subject the individual who got injured to the full scope of the void of the dark side. This was one of the few recorded occasions of such power in use. One of these tendrils brushed against Bane, causing him to feel pain unlike anything he had ever known. Managing to stay conscious, he was able to attack Zannah and swiftly disarm her. As the Dark Lord prepared to kill his apprentice, a tendril lunged up, grabbing his arm and vaporizing it. In a flash of pain and fury, and seeing no alternative left, Bane released his essence, determined now to destroy Zannah's consciousness and take control over her body. The two Sith Lords matched wills, each trying to push the other out. It was believed that if a Force user's body perished after a failed attempt at transferring essence, the user's life energy was lost and dispersed in the Great Void, a reputedly dark region of the netherworld of the Force, where the spirits of all evil sentient beings who had died dwell in torment. The attempt was strong, but Bane's body was destroyed, turned to ash by the power of the ritual. After a struggle of wills, it was over. Zannah had triumphed, and though a small portion of her master remained in her, the Dark Lord Bane, creator of the Rule of Two, was dead. Bane owned and had access to a vast collection of Sith scrolls, tomes, and texts. Bane personally discovered the hidden lore of at least 4 legendary Sith Lords from their holocrons, those of Darth Revan, Freeden Nad, Belia Dazu, and Darth Andidu. Bane's own holocron, created at some point before 980 before the Battle of Yavin, he would have been somewhere in his 40s at this time, was a small pyramid-shaped device that contained all of his knowledge, which he planned to pass down to future Dark Lords in his Sith Order. Darth Bane attempted to make a holocron on 3 separate occasions. On his first attempt, he worked diligently day and night on it, only to have its matrix collapse in on itself. In his second attempt, he was more meticulous and cautious. He took his time and ensured that everything was as it should be. In the end, though, the matrix degraded beyond use. On his third attempt, he allowed the Force to guide his movements, putting faith in the Force alone to allow the matrix to develop as it should. He worked for weeks at it, with similar results to what he had produced in his previous attempt. Upon his failure, his apprentice, Darth Zannah, planted a seed of doubt in his head that his infestation of the Orbalisk was causing his multiple attempts to end with no avail. With time to consider, Darth Bane sent her to obtain more information on the Orbalisk parasites, and while Zannah was in search of this, Bane went to Tython in search of Belia Dazu's holocron, which contained detailed information on how a holocron is constructed. Bane reviewed the knowledge held within Belia Dazu's holocron and discovered where he had failed in his attempts. All Sith holocrons had capstones, wherein the creator must capture their own cognitive essence before the fine-tuning stages. The capstone was a black crystal housed within the center of the device. It was a vital part of a Sith holocron's construction. It serves the dual purpose of both an energy source for the device, as well as a home of sorts for the gatekeeper, or the cognitive essence of the holocron's creator. Darth Bane found that his fault was not in his infestation of the Orbalisk, but his failure to link the matrix of the holocron to the capstone. Thus, he was now capable of creating a holocron successfully. By the time he succeeded, his physical appearance was such that he had removed the Orbalisks that plagued his body, but still, his holocron's gatekeeper was still clad in the crustacean armor he used to wear. Gatekeeper was the term used for the artificial personality that granted a user access to the information within the holocron. The Gatekeeper was usually based upon the creator of the particular holocron. Darth Bane's Gatekeeper made his appearance more visually impressive and intimidating. Bane intended this to be a message to the future Sith who would use his holocron. The power of the dark side required one to make sacrifices. He also saw it as an advantage should his holocron fall into Jedi hands while he was still alive. The mask he used to keep the Orbalisks off of his face and head would conceal his identity. Darth Bane was trained in lightsaber combat by the Blade Master Qasim. He became a deadly lightsaber duelist. Bane developed a slightly altered style with his unique weapon, the subtleties of which were recognized by only the most experienced weapon handlers. After Bane acquired his lightsaber impervious Orbalisk armor, he favored a furious, all-offensive style of Dessel, and capitalized on his tremendous physical strength to overwhelm opponents.
Explanation.
Dessel was a variant of Form 5, the fifth of 7 forms for lightsaber combat recognized by the Jedi. Dessel was specifically intended for use in lightsaber combat, designed to use the opponent's attacks against them, emphasizing immediate counterattacks. Although some Jedi felt that Form 5 encouraged aggression and domination, that sentiment did not stop many Jedi from practicing the form. His battle prowess was realized when he held his own against 3 battle meditation-invigorated Jedi in combat on Tython, a group of which included Rask Tal Su, who was considered to be the greatest contemporary duelist in the Order. It should be noted, however, that the Jedi Weapon Master managed to score numerous would-be lethal hits on Bane during this duel, and as such, his impenetrable armor was of paramount importance to his victory. Additionally, his victory came only after the Jedi's battle meditation ceased, and the Jedi Weapon Master was killed by a sneak attack from Zannah. During this duel, Zannah noted that Bane's lightsaber technique was somewhat unrefined. However, this lack of refinement was intentional, as Bane believed that eschewing technical sophistication for fury-driven, strength-oriented swordplay increased his effectiveness as a duelist. During combat, Darth Bane was likened by his enemies to a force of nature. When he was no longer afforded the protection of Orbalisk armor, Bane adapted a more complex and unpredictable style that incorporated feints and defensive maneuvers. He was also skilled in Soresu, and taught his apprentice Darth Zannah Form 3 to complement her petite physical frame.
Explanation.
Form 3, also known as Soresu, was the third of the 7 classic forms of lightsaber combat. Soresu was developed during the widespread emergence of blasters as an offensive weapon. This form relied on tight blade work and subtle dodges to provide maximum defensive coverage, minimizing exposure to ranged weaponry. In his later years, Darth Bane's speed was such that he was able to deflect torrents of rain with his lightsaber. Bane was even proficient in Juyo, which he may have used in his final duel with Zannah, and was an excellent brawler and unarmed combatant, thanks to his time in the mines of Apatros. Bane was also extremely adept at utilizing the Dunmöch technique.
Explanation.
Dunmöch was a form of combat that used distraction and doubt, usually through taunting, in conjunction with lightsaber combat. The Sith aimed to completely dominate an opponent's spirit through whatever means possible by employing their own lightsaber combat doctrine. Dunmöch commonly involved spoken taunts, jeers and jests that exposed the opponent's hidden inner weaknesses or doubts, which had the end result of eroding the opponent's will. Mental attacks would also be utilized during combat in order to strip one's concentration with the Force, making an opponent less precise and effective. Such a thing could be quite deadly, especially against Jedi, since concentration was of vital importance when using the Force. As such, Dunmöch embodied using the Force as a form of psychological warfare. Darth Bane was very talented in the Force. As a miner on Apatros, he was able to use the Force on occasion, though he had no understanding of it, and his use was largely instinctive. However, after he received formal training at the Korriban Academy, Bane became one of the most skilled students there. He was highly dedicated to his training and spent hours reading ancient Sith texts, knowledge that was forsaken by the school's other attendees. In addition, he received private lessons in the ways of the dark side and excelled. He desired to become a great and powerful Sith Lord and spent a tremendous amount of time practicing in hopes of perfecting his skills. Bane was a very fast learner and quickly passed many students at the Korriban Academy in just a few months. He possessed great telekinetic power. Bane was able to cast electric voltage so strong that most opponents died instantly upon contact, the energy output leaving their bodies burned and charred. He was able to plunge deep into his hate and draw fully on the power of the dark side to unleash powerful force waves, the strength of which devastated almost anything in their path. Darth Bane was able to create a spherical death field of pure dark side energy around himself that instantly withered away anyone unlucky enough to be caught within its radius. However, this ability was extremely exhausting to the point where it was highly impractical for Bane to use unaided. Bane displayed a great tolerance for physical pain, such as that brought on by the Orbalisk armor he was forced to wear. The Dark Lord was able to use the infestation to his benefit by taking the pain and fueling his dark side rage with it. Besides being impenetrable to lightsabers, the Orbalisks also provided Bane with chemical enhancements to his senses, stamina, strength, and speed. Furthermore, it provided him with an enhanced healing factor. A knife wound that Bane once inflicted upon himself, for instance, healed virtually as he made it, and even a lightsaber blow which struck his arm was healed within seconds. Most importantly, Bane could tap into the parasite's ability to draw on the dark side to greatly increase his own power while they remained attached to him. One drawback to being infested with the Orbalisks was that because they drew on Bane's power to feed themselves, he was only capable of performing delicate tasks with the Force for a somewhat limited period of time. This was due to the fact that in order to precisely modulate his powers for subtle tasks, he had to cut the Orbalisks completely off from the dark side. This in turn caused the parasites to pump increasingly greater amounts of mood-altering chemicals into Bane's body in an attempt to get him to draw more strongly on the dark side, and thus feed them. Bane was capable of resisting the effects of the chemicals, including ever-mounting levels of pain, for a significant period of time. However, he was not immune to them, and at one point considered ridding himself of the parasites due to this problem. Ultimately, he discovered that the Orbalisks did not cause nearly as great an issue with his abilities as he had feared, and resolved to keep them. Bane was highly resistant to poison and escaped death by its means on several occasions. The Dark Lord was capable of drawing on the fear and anguish of other beings to increase his own power. He achieved this in one instance when he had been weakened, and he slayed several young boys, then proceeded to draw on their father's horror and suffering, using it to temporarily give him strength. He also possessed remarkable willpower and determination. He was able to force Undeath's Holocron to reveal to him knowledge that the Holocron's gatekeeper was actively attempting to keep from him, and was skilled enough to attempt the deadly ritual of essence transfer. By channeling the pain and anguish of others to fuel the dark side, Bane could sustain or invigorate himself. However, Bane was still susceptible to the flaw of the dark side-based healing, requiring the use of inner darkness to maintain. Furthermore, Bane had the theoretical ability to draw upon the light side of the Force to heal himself, but refrained from ever doing so, believing that invoking the light would be against everything the Sith stood for, as well as ultimately deny him the chance to grow through suffering. Bane was able to easily resist Lord Khan's mind tricks, while the other Dark Lords in the Brotherhood were unable to do so. Bane was a master of deception and used his skills to fool others even before he received formal training. The Dark Lord was able to read his opponents and conceal his own feelings, talents which he used to become a talented sabacc player. He was also able to sense poisons in himself and could often cure himself by purging the toxins from his body. Furthermore, his immense power in the dark side of the Force made it such that he almost never needed to sleep, except when pushed to extreme exhaustion. Instead, he relied on an hour or two of daily meditation to keep his body energized and his mind invigorated. Darth Bane wielded a red-bladed curved-hilt lightsaber, which he received in recognition of his skill. By 980, before the Battle of Yavin, he was somewhere in his 40s at this time, Darth Bane owned a large mansion, where he spent most of his time alongside his apprentice. The two had immense wealth, which they used to continue to build up their network of spies and plan for the time when the Sith could destroy the Jedi. Bane had also created a holocron which held all of his knowledge, and posing as a simple collector, the Dark Lord had acquired a great number of Sith artifacts. The wealth he had primarily obtained from Cordis, one of the highest-ranking members of the Brotherhood of Darkness, whom Bane had killed. Bane had found his personal belongings and came across information about the location of Friedenad's tomb, as well as several account numbers where Cordis had kept his wealth, of which he had a great deal. Darth Bane wielded blaster rifles in his youth, as well as blaster pistols. He also used several vessels and ships as a means of transportation. Information is a commodity. It can be traded, sold, and purchased, and in the end, credits are only as useful as the secrets they can buy. He was a resourceful Sith. When he obtained Friedenad's holocron, he was stranded on Duxon and he needed to get to Onderon. He used the dark side to tame a flying Drexel, which he then mounted and rode to the sky. Once a year, Duxon approached Onderon so closely that their atmospheres would merge, and ferocious beasts could make the crossing. This was one such time, and Darth Bane managed to reach Onderon on his flying Drexel mount.
Theory.
There are many speculations on this event, and although not proven to be true, one entertaining theory suggests that Darth Bane, who was at the peak of his power at the time, might have nudged the moon of Duxon through his dark side powers in order to reach Onderon, for it had been too far away at the time for their atmospheres to merge. Of course, this speculation is just for entertainment, the verification of which we shall leave for a different time. Bane was extremely dedicated to the Sith cause, and was determined to bring about the end of the Jedi, though he knew he might not live to see it. He was a firm believer in the rule of the strong, viewing the weak as chains holding back the powerful. According to the natural order of things, Bane believed the weak should serve the strong, rather than being treated as equals. Whereas the Jedi and the Republic believed that it was the duty of the strong to help the weak, Bane believed that the strong were intended to rule the weak masses. Equality, Bane believed, was a lie perpetuated by the Jedi. One of the reasons he hated the Brotherhood was that it supported equality amongst the Sith. Bane's rule of two was designed with the intention of strengthening the Sith Order over time, with each apprentice challenging their master for the title of Dark Lord. If the apprentice failed, the master would ideally find another apprentice. In this way, each successive Dark Lord would be stronger than their predecessor. Darth Bane imparted his beliefs, particularly his theory of rule of the strong, to Zannah. He was once forced to duel an opponent and received no assistance from his apprentice. Bane confronted her, asking why she had not helped him. She replied that she knew that Bane would be able to kill the man and his assassins. But what would have happened if she had been wrong? She stated that if he was unable to do so, he was weak and unworthy of his title of Dark Lord. Bane was pleased with this explanation, stating that she was correct. Only the strongest survive. Another problem Bane saw in the structure of the Brotherhood was its inclusion of numerous Sith. He was convinced that the Sith's greatest strength, their ambition, was also their greatest weakness, and would be checked by the rule of two. With a multitude of Sith, he felt that it was practically inevitable that they would constantly be fighting amongst themselves, leaving them unable to focus on their true foe, the Jedi. Additionally, he believed that the power of the dark side was finite, and that the existence of many Sith spread the power of the dark side thin. By creating a system that allowed for the existence of only 2 Sith Lords at any one time, Bane believed that he could keep the Sith strong and safe from the Jedi. Many centuries after his death, his Holocron's gatekeeper mocked Darth Kreia for abandoning the rule of 2 for his rule of 1, telling this pretender that his order would destroy itself, that so many similarly structured Sith Orders had. Bane's philosophy caused him to view Lord Khan and the other Sith of his time as fools, and he believed that as long as the Brotherhood of Darkness existed, the Sith would be unable to triumph over the Jedi. He even went so far as to label the leader of the Brotherhood, Khan, a coward, unworthy of the title Dark Lord of the Sith. To symbolize that his new Sith Order was different from the Brotherhood, Bane revived the title of Darth, which Khan had discouraged, by claiming that it was antiquated and encouraged unnecessary competition among the Sith. Later in life, the Dark Lord sought the secrets to achieving immortality, but not because he feared death, but simply because he believed that Zannah was too weak to claim his title. Bane suspected that his apprentice was waiting until he was old and weak to challenge him, at which point she could easily defeat him. However, were she to do this, she would not prove her superiority, as was necessitated by the rule of 2. To ensure the Sith's survival, Bane undertook his search for the fabled Darth Andidu. Ultimately, Zannah proved herself a worthy successor when she killed Bane. Bane's cunning and vision made him a transformative figure in Sith history. He learned hatred and anger at an early age, as he grew up with a father who hated him. He took to the dark side with ease at first, although the human lost his faith after realizing that he was responsible for his father's death. Afraid of the dark side, he pulled away, only to regain his confidence with the assistance of the ancient Sith in the form of texts. From there, Bane grew strong, quickly surpassing even Lord Khan. With the dark side as his ally, he founded a new Sith Order, one based on secrecy and rule of the strong. Bane possessed an extremely strong will. On multiple occasions, when severely wounded, he refused to surrender, using the power of the dark side to fuel himself and keep fighting. Bane bore a vitriolic hatred for beings like Argel 10, who considered themselves masters of the dark side, but in fact were unable to use the Force. The Dark Lord desired to reveal his true identity and power to Ten, whom he felt knew nothing of the dark side's true power, but knew that to do so would be foolish. A practical man, Bane found no value in wealth or other material possessions, believing that the worth of an object was directly correlated to its usefulness. Upon his acquisition of vast wealth, he used it only to further the Sith cause. He also did not believe in the concept of honorable death, viewing honor as a fool's prize. Though he was absolutely ruthless and never hesitated to kill when he believed it necessary, Bane was very disdainful of those who killed without purpose, viewing those who enjoyed killing as barbarous, perverse fools. Despite his bond with the dark side of the Force, Bane has shown the ability to develop emotions for another individual. He developed feelings for a woman with whom he had been a pupil on Korriban, but upon seeing that she didn't share his views on the Brotherhood or on Khan, he judged her unworthy and quickly abandoned such thoughts. Power is its own purpose. To share it is to dilute it. You delude yourself, pretender. Your order will yet turn on itself and you. Darth Zannah would continue the rule of two by taking on an apprentice of her own and continuing the cycle. The lightsaber crystal, Bane's heart, which had been created by Bane and given to Zannah, fell into the possession of the cyborg warrior General Grievous almost a millennium after the Dark Lord's death. In the year 20 before the Battle of Yavin, the Grand Master of the Jedi Order, Yoda, traveled to Korriban on a journey to learn the gift of manifesting life after death. When he entered one of the temples, located in the Valley of the Dark Lords, Yoda discovered a tomb that had been built for Bane. A giant, smoldering spectre of Bane then emerged from a sarcophagus and tried to tempt the Jedi Master into becoming his apprentice. However, Yoda declared the spectre of Bane to be nothing but an illusion from the past, with nothing to offer him, and the fiery ghost disappeared. In 19 before the Battle of Yavin, Bane's dream was finally realized, and his rule of two validated, when the Sith under Darth Sidious and Darth Vader finally achieved control over the galaxy and nearly wiped out the Jedi Order. Darth Bane was the legendary Sithari, an individual who had been prophesied to restore the Sith to glory. Because of the Sith Order Bane had forged a millennium earlier, the prophecy ultimately came true. In 4, after the Battle of Yavin, however, the Sith's victory was undone when Darth Vader, who redeemed himself back into the Jedi Knight, Anakin Skywalker, killed Sidious during the Battle of Endor to save his son, Luke Skywalker, before expiring from his injuries, bringing Bane's established Sith lineage to an end. Like Bane, Sidious was able to learn the power of transfer essence and used it to survive his first death, but was ultimately defeated. Bane's Holocron eventually fell into the hands of Darth Great. In 137, after the Battle of Yavin, it was accessed, along with those of Darth Nihilus and Darth Undeath, on Korriban by Krayt. The new Dark Lord wished to learn from Bane's experience with the parasitic Orbalisks. Bane chastised Krayt for not following the rule of two, telling Krayt his new rule of one would be the very undoing of the Sith. Darth Bane was a powerful and highly impactful Sith. He instituted a rule that would significantly change the path of the Sith through history, even though it involved the destruction of the current Sith Order, which ruled at the time. It's yet another lesson of the majority not always being in the right, and that just because a nation, an order, or a group of individuals is guided by common teachings, it doesn't mean such teachings are correct. I also think that Darth Bane's quote on power between those who deserve it and those who are too weak to wield it is important, and we can learn from it. He stated that those who are weak do not deserve equality. While this is a brutal sentiment in the grand scheme of things, in particular for our world where there are so many who suffer and indeed are weaker than others, I think it's a valuable lesson to take to heart. While we might not need or should treat those weaker than us as such, I think it's important to grasp that the world we live in is dominated by similar principle, and that there are those more powerful than we are. It is ruled by those with power, and as long as we view ourselves as satisfied with that image, that's how it's going to remain, and our power will not increase. Instead, if we identify that we want more power, wealth, or knowledge, and manipulate the world around us to achieve it, whether it be in a positive or negative way, courtesy of Christ's teachings, we can indeed obtain more of it, and then dispense with it as we please, again with good or bad intentions in mind. In this point, it doesn't matter whether the motivation for this is good or bad, if you're motivated to obtain power to be selfish and self-centered about it, or if you're motivated to do so in order to elevate others and help the world. It is of no importance in this context. What is important is to see the world as it is, a struggle for power between those willing to do what needs to be done to obtain it and those who are satisfied with being still, go with the flow, and allow themselves to be manipulated. There's nothing wrong with wanting either, so long as we are aware where we are on the spectrum. A very important situation that struck me in the topic of this video is where Darth Zannah wouldn't help Bane in a fight. At the end of the fight, Bane asks her why she didn't help him, and she claimed that if he relied on her help, he would prove himself to be weak and unworthy of his title. Of course, this isn't to be taken in a literal sense. You can't expect her to allow him to battle an army of soldiers and then expect for him to win. Instead, we need to view it from a philosophical perspective, and I do agree with her point, regardless of this extreme demonstration. If we apply that to today's terms, we should be prepared to abandon our teachers, our mentors, to let them quote-unquote die to the metaphorical soldier if they prove themselves to be unqualified or wrong. For example, when a student surpasses the teacher, they no longer turn to that teacher for critical guidance, in much the same way we surpass our parents, or at least we strive to do so. And at a given point in time, we no longer turn to our parents for need, but instead provide it to ourselves and to them. We become more powerful than them, and they turn to us for guidance and aid. This, of course, is the ideal goal for any parent, I'd imagine, because it means the parent has succeeded in their task and carried out their legacy. The issue is not recognizing this spectrum and this measurement of power and seeing who is the stronger party. And it can be especially dangerous when it comes to greater schemes, such as political movements and greater shifts in the population. In terms of Star Wars, this was the case with the Sith Order and the Jedi Order. You observe it and you can disagree and see that the entire order is wrong. You can see that the Jedi have a tendency to make flawed judgments. You can see that the Sith can be quite evil and make wrong judgments for the whole. But it's very easy to make these points when you're viewing it as fiction. In the real world, we are far more hesitant to doubt things as easily as we are in fiction. When a political movement or a belief takes a turn to where it no longer is what it started out as, this means its goals are different. It's no longer that same movement. Or if it contradicts itself, it needs to be abandoned, or at least modified. The problem is that in this example of a political movement, individuals who follow this movement do not recognize this change. Their own beliefs are warped to fit the new beliefs established by the new movement. This is very closely tied to a quote from Kreia which states, "To believe in an ideal is to be willing to betray it." This means that if you're willing to betray an ideal, but you still stand by it, even though you're willing to betray it, your stance is pure and genuine. So the belief has no power over you because you're ready to abandon it as soon as you see a change in it that does not align with its original path. That means that your current belief is genuine. Instead, if you're not willing to betray your belief, even if it's proven to be false, it means this belief has power over you, and you are its slave. And it can change as much as it wants to, and manipulate you as much as it wants to. You will not abandon it. We can see genuine belief in individuals who yearn for knowledge and truth. A scientist, for example, a true, genuine scientist, when presented with data that proves a scientific theory to be false, will immediately reject that flawed theory and seek out a new theory. The scientist would be enslaved by their beliefs if they still proceeded to cling to this flawed theory. Of course, this is all general. As a scientist or a believer in a political movement, your job is to research and dig as deep as possible to find all the information you have to obtain the truth, the way Bane did when he dug through the Sith archives and gathered extensive amounts of data before making his decision that the movement of the Brotherhood is wrong. The Sith who said, "Don't look at the archive," were the ones chained by the current belief. At the end of the day, if their belief in the current Sith Order was so genuine and pure, they should be willing to defend and debate any question that emerges from these ancient Sith archives. This same concept applies today for situations where people attack those who question their beliefs. If you're so secure and sure in the beliefs of the movement you're representing, you should be willing to discuss and dismantle any and all questions about that said movement. And should a question or point prove the movement to be flawed, it's your job to research. Another intriguing scene which brings many debates to surface was the way Darth Bane killed and fed on the fear of his victims. At one point, Bane had been in a poisoned state, and needed a way to replenish his energy to fight the poisons off. And as was stated in the personality description, he was a person who did not find pleasure in killing, and he loathed those that did. However, killing didn't appear to bring him any ethical conflicts or remorse because he did it when he deemed it necessary and didn't really question it. So a father, a human male, had 3 sons. They were scavenging, and one of his sons found Mandalorian armor in the rubble. The youngest son found Darth Bane's lightsaber. Lying in the rubble, hidden from their sight, and weakened to the brink of death, Bane felt the father's fear as he noticed his son, finding this lightsaber. He felt the fear that something was wrong. Bane decided he needed to survive no matter the cost. So the lightsaber, the father told his child to throw away the lightsaber, and then the lightsaber ignited in the boy's hand. It spun in the air, and it killed him instantly. Then the lightsaber leapt to the eldest son, cutting him from behind. Then Bane drew in the horror of their deaths and could have enough energy to rise to his feet. The story would describe it. He was coming into view like an apparition disgorged from the bowels of the planet, so it was like a pretty horrifying sight. The father then holds the youngest son and begs the Dark Lord to spare the child. He's the youngest, he's the last one I have, the father says. And Bane found his belief was that those weak enough to beg for mercy do not deserve it. He was still too weak to raise his arms, so he raised the blade again using his telekinesis, and he brings it closer to the target, to the child, and he allows the horror to build in the father. Then he plunges the lightsaber into the boy's heart, and the father is crying in horror, and as he is crying in anguish and horror and pain and sorrow, Bane becomes stronger. The symptoms of the poisons recede. The father is cowering at this point, and he asks over and over again, why did you make me witness the death of my sons? And then Bane takes hold of the lightsaber and he kills him there. So it seems to me that he observed death as a very simple tool with very little weight to it. It was a very cold, direct tool in his hands. So he needed to survive, and he needed to kill these people to survive, and he did it. And there's no ethical debate about it. One could argue this is a simple, clean approach as it achieves the desired result. But of course, only a person without any remorse or emotions holding them back could do such a thing. I suppose you need to have a view of death that is like that, since you are teaching an apprentice whom you expect to kill you one day, so you do kind of need to be cold about it. And you actually view that killing as a favorable outcome, like you're looking forward to your apprentice surpassing you and killing you. So that's about it on Darth Bane. He's a very intriguing character, very interesting. I do think that I might make a video about him further down the line. There are some very interesting stories because there were several books written about him, and he was featured in certain other scenes that are very interesting. So I will look into potentially building up on those and discussing them in more detail. I think it would also be very interesting to cover where he traveled with Zannah, how he taught her, and certain other scenes. And I think it's quite interesting how she already had the affinity to manipulate him and to put a seed of doubt in his mind and all that. So she was very much learning from him. She was a pretty good apprentice. So that's about it, and let me know what other Sith or Jedi you would like. It's very likely that the next one would be a Jedi, because now we've done 2 Darksiders in a row. So yeah, I look forward to researching on that. I'm thinking maybe Satele Shan, or I don't know, Bastila. I would maybe make a full video on her, but like a really long video. But I don't really know. I'll get back to you on that. And that's about it. I'll see you in the next video. Actually, I'll see you in the comments. I quite enjoy going through the comments and responding. Not that many comments lately, but that's chill. I appreciate people just watching, because my YouTube view time is telling me that the view time's good. So yeah. So I'll see you in the next one. Cheers. Oh, time for the outro.